Yes, I'll tell you something. There's one of the most chashuv mitzvahs a person can do is what's called the meis mitzvah. Right? What's a meis mitzvah? So, a person passes away and there's not a lot of family, there's no one to take care of it. So, even if you don't know the person, to go and to take care of someone that doesn't have anyone, it's a very, very chashuv mitzvah. So, there's a famous saying from Rabbi Yehuda Levi, writes this in Sefer Chassidim, that in learning also there's such a concept of a meis mitzvah. If you have a particular section of Torah, a certain inyan that no one seems to be focusing on, that's called a meis mitzvah. And then when you focus on that, not only do you get the reward of just the regular learning, but it's also called a meis mitzvah. So this Shabbos, like all the rabbis of the world are going to be talking about Shabbos Hagadol, and as it's appropriate, obviously getting close to Pesach. And then Parshas Mitzvah is sort of left out in the cold, it's Rachmanis. So it's a little bit of a meis mitzvah. So let's talk about a little bit Parshas Mitzvah. Now we have to talk about Shabbos Hagadol too, because, you have to. But Bal Kaponim talk about Parshas Mitzvah as well. This Shabbos, as I just said, is called Shabbos Hagadol. Why is it called the Great Shabbos? So the Rishonim bring down, because that year of Yetzias Mitzrayim, so the 10th of Nisan fell out on Shabbos. And the significance of that day, the 10th of Nisan, was that's the day that they were told to prepare the sheep in order to bring it as a carbon Pesach. And so the Rishonim bring down the Medrash that when they did that, so the Egyptians asked the Jews, what's going on? What are you doing with the sheep? So they said, we're preparing it to sacrifice to Hashem as a carbon. And this was something that they knew the Egyptians would not be happy about, because the sheep was one of the many gods of the Egyptians. And nevertheless they did it. And despite the fact the Egyptians were upset, they didn't say anything. And so that's the great miracle. That's Shabbos Hagadol. And so to commemorate that, we call it Shabbos Hagadol. The rabbis make drushes and so on. Even though it's like a similar thing. Like the Egyptians knew they weren't happy about what's going on, but they bit their tongue. So people, the rabbi talks, and people also have to bite their tongue. That's the way we celebrate Shabbos Hagadol. Al Kolpanim. So the question is like this: of all the miracles that are revolving around Pesach, why would that be called Hagadol, the great miracle? If Kriyas Yamsuf, you have Makas Becharis, you name it, all the plagues, all the Makas, all the Nisim, 250 Nisim, Rabbi Akiva said in the Haggadah that took place by Yetzias Mitzrayim. And so of all those things, what's the nace? That the Mitzrayim didn't bother us when we prepared the sheep. That's Shabbos Hagadol. And that's how we prepare, that's how we get into Pesach. Why is that the Hachana for Pesach? So that's as far as Shabbos Hagadol is concerned. We'll get back to that B'ez Hashem. Our parsha, the beginning of Parshas Mitzvah, we have the halachis of someone that has tzaras, right? What's tzaras? What's a mitzvah? So someone we know is stricken with this skin issue of tzaras, and we know that tzaras comes from primarily lashon hara, tzarasayin being a negative, pessimistic person, always being judgmental and seeing the negative in others. And so the halachas of tzaras were discussed last week. In this week's parsha, we have the discussion of how the tzaras becomes purified, how to relieve oneself from tzaras. It says like this. It says as follows: it says the pasuk. This is the halachas of tzaras when the person is ready to become purified from it. Uhuv al kayin. He has to go to the kayin. He's brought to the kayin. Then the pasuk says v'yatza kayin l'chutz hamachna, and the kayin goes to him outside of the camp, sees that the tzaras has began to shrink or dimmed in color and so on, and we can start the process. Now the commentators ask a very simple question. We know that the Mitzorah until this point, as a Mitzorah, he's been kicked out of the Machna, of the Jewish camp, all walled cities in Eretz Yisrael he's kicked out of, and he's not allowed in. Now the Kahanim are inside the Machna, within the walled cities. And so the Pasuk says, V'yatza kayin l'chutz hamachna. The kayin has to go out to go see the Mitzorah, to visit him, to pay a house call, to see if the Tzaras has become cured enough that we could start the Tahara process. But here's the contradiction. The previous pasuk said v'huv al kain. The mitzvah has to go to the kain, and then immediately the next words are v'yatza kain l'chutz hamachna. The kain goes out to meet him. Which one is it? Is the mitzvah going to the kain, or is the kain going to the mitzvah? Halachically speaking, it has to be the kain going to the mitzvah because the mitzvah can't come in. And so, what is the meaning therefore of the pasuk v'huv al kain, that the kain has to go to the mitzvah has to go to the kain? So, which one is it? Okay. One final question, then we'll begin to talk. One final question. If you remember going back to the story of Pesach, right? The story of Galus Mitzrayim. So we know there's a famous incident, right? The pasuk says, Moshe Rabbeinu was raised in the palace, as we know. Vigdal Moshe v'yatzalachiv. Moshe Rabbeinu grows up, he becomes mature, and he goes out to see what's going on, and he sees a Jew being beaten by an Egyptian, by a Mitzri, right? And so Vifan Kai V'chai V'yarki Anish, Moshe Rabbeinu looks around, sees there's nothing going on, and he kills the Mitzri. Then the pasuk says, as we know, the next day he goes and he sees two Jews fighting with each other, right? Dasan and Aviram, and he sees one Jew raising a hand against another, and he says, Rashi says, wicked person, why are you hitting another Jew? And so what does the Jew respond? Halargeni ato aimer kasharaktas Mitzri. Who put you in charge? You're going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian. So Moshe says, it's known, the matter is known. And because of that, Moshe Rabbeinu leaves and he goes into exile to Midian and so on. What does it mean, the matter is known? So the simple pshat is, again, Moshe is saying that, like people know what I just did, and now I'm in trouble. Rashi brings down from Chazal another interpretation, which is, the Moshe said, my whole life I'm bothered, why are we in Galus? What's the cause of our exile? What's the Siba for Galus Mitzrayim? Usually Galus has an Avera that we can blame it on. What was that Avera? What's causing us to be stuck in this Galus? And Moshe said, I was Niskasha, but I had this problem until now. Now I see Dasan and Aviram fighting with each other, and I see Lashon Hara. I see one Jew being able just to come out of his mouth a secret, something negative about another Jew, that he's willing to say, you're going to kill me like you killed the Mitzri. It's a lack of Shmir Salashon, an Inyan of Lashon Hara, saying something negative about another Jew. Now I know why Galus Mitzrayim is happening. So the question we have to figure this out is, why is Lashon Hara so terrible? Why is Lashon Hara so terrible that it should be the cause for the first and deepest of all Golusim, Galus Mitzrayim? Now, obviously, there's the reason why it's appropriate to talk about this. Not only is it Pesach, but obviously Mitzorah, the sin that the Mitzorah that has Tzaras is because of Lashon Hara. So, what is it about Lashon Hara and the Mitzorah that brings Galus Mitzrayim, brings slavery? Because understand that exile of Mitzrayim was unique in all Jewish history. That was slavery. We were never enslaved like that ever again, and we never will be. There was something unique about that exile. So, what is that Nakuda? So we have to, let's think for a second. Let's be a little bit, let's be therapists for a second. Why does a person say Lashon Hara? Why does a person say Lashon Hara? Why is it that this person, without being provoked at all, just wants to bring up other people's bad, dirty laundry? Why does a person want to do that? So there can be many causes. One simple cause is that this guy, listen, everyone has their own dirty laundry. You know what I'm saying? Everyone has their own peklach, their own baggage, their own stuff that they have to deal with. And one of the easiest ways to avoid the responsibility of taking care of oneself, of taking responsibility for one's own life, is by shifting one's focus on other people. It's a simple eitzah. In other words, one of the causes for the Mitzorah, the problem that the Mitzorah faces, is his inability and his unwillingness to be makabel achrayus, to take responsibility for himself, and to say, you know what, that guy has a problem. It's true, but I have a problem as well, and I'm gonna focus on myself, not egocentric wise, but I'm gonna focus on my own issues, and I'm gonna pick myself up, and I'm not going to allow myself to just continue like this. The problem with Mitzorah is that he doesn't do that. The problem with Mitzorah is that instead of being makabel achrayus, instead of taking responsibility, instead of saying this guy has an issue, that guy has an issue, but I have an issue too. And the one that I have to be focused on, the issues that I should be focused on, are my issues. Instead of that, he doesn't want to deal with that. So because of that, he just simply focuses other people's attention and his own attention on other people. That's a simple eitzah. The beginning of the Mitzorah's tikkun, the beginning of his rectification is what? Is that he has to begin to stand up on his own 2 feet and to take responsibility for himself, and to say, V'huva l'kayin, I have to take the initiative to become closer to that kayin, so to speak. Remember the question we had in the beginning, which one is it? Does the kohen go to him, as the pasuk says, V'yatza kayin? Or is it V'huva l'kayin, does the Mitzorah go to the kayin? Which one? Says Ratzadek HaKayin of Lublin and Pri Tzadik, he says, physically speaking, the kohen goes to the Mitzorah. That's how it has to happen. The Mitzorah is outside the camp, he can't come in. So physically, the kohen has to go to him. But what diminished his saras to the point of where the Kohen would be allowed to start the purification process is because within himself, within the Mitzorah's own mind and his own heart, he started to begin to move towards the Kohen. Instead of remaining passive and always focusing on everything else around him and blaming one's problems on everything else around him, The Kohen has begun to take steps towards, the Mitzvah has begun to take the steps towards becoming a Kohen, towards becoming a better person. There's a famous story in the Gemara with somebody named Elazar ben Durdaya. It's a famous story. Elazar ben Durdaya, the Gemara says, was a very big Baal Avera. He was very religious in his Averas. He did every Avera possible, Very, very big Avera. And something happened in his life. While he was doing an Avera, something happened that sort of inspired him. He has to become better. The Gemara says an interesting thing of Avodah Zarah. The Gemara says that when he had this inspiration to become better, he went outside and he said to the heavens, he said, "Heavens, do tshuva for me, daven to Hashem for me." And the heavens said, "We're very sorry, we're davening for ourselves, we're busy davening for ourselves." He turns to the mountains, "Mountains, do tshuva for me, daven to Hashem for me." Sorry, we have to take care of ourselves. And he goes like that from one part of the universe to the other until he says the final words, "Ein hadavar tali ela bi." It depends on only me. No one else is taking care of me, I have to do it myself. The Gemara says he put his head between his knees, and he sobbed until his soul departed from him. A heavenly voice came out and said, "Rebbe Elazar ben Durdaya is going straight to Gan Eden." So tshuva begins, the Mitzvah's tikkun begins with him making the effort of ahuva l'kain, that he is going towards the kain. Now so far, that's your classic Musar Shmuz, many Rebbeim, that's classic. But that's not enough. We have to go deeper. It's not enough just to tell a person, okay, so pick yourself up by your bootstraps, go further. But we have to analyze it further. Why does the Mitzvah, the one that's stricken with tzaras, the one that's saying lashon hara, so what's stopping him from taking achrayus? So why is that? And what changes that all of a sudden a shift happens and now he's moving towards the kain? What's the cause? So I mentioned this last week, and I'll mention it again. It's kedai to mention. The Zohar Kodesh says in the Sefer Yetzirah that the problem with tzaras, the tzaras is called a nega. That's the term that's used. It's a nega. The word nega, the Sefer Yetzirah says, is the opposite. It's opposed to something else which is called oneg. Oneg means pleasure, like oneg Shabbos. Nega, the same letters, is the opposite of oneg. What does that mean? So I mentioned last week, I mentioned again, the Zohar Kodesh says in Parshas Emor that the word oineg, what does delight mean? What is real delight? Oineg, the Zohar says, is the Rosh Tevis Eiden Nahar Gan. Eiden Nahar Gan. What does that all mean? It means like this. The reason why the Mitzorah does not want to take responsibility, the reason why the Mitzorah wants to look at oneself in a way that he is affected by all causes, and he's unable to cause and to affect anything else, is because the Mitzorah ultimately does not believe that there's any part of him that's not trapped in his spiral. In other words, in order for a person to truly change oneself, one has to be mom, and one has to believe that there's a part of oneself that's already changed, or there's a part of oneself that's not stuck in that problem. See, very often the problem that we face that stops us from taking steps forward in Yiddishkeit is because we become so entangled and enmeshed in the tsar, in the Mitzrayim, in that constriction, in that problem, and there's no, and we completely identify ourselves as people that are enmeshed in that problem, and we don't recognize within ourselves any point or any part that's outside of the problem to help ourselves climb out of it. So let's say if a person's, let's say, God forbid, in quicksand, right? So how do you get out of quicksand? You start digging in the quicksand, you're going to get yourself deeper. And what do? You have to find a spot that's outside of the quicksand and pull yourself up from that. The problem of the Mitzorah, the reason why the Mitzorah doesn't want to take responsibility is because he doesn't see any einig in his life. He doesn't see any part of him that's still in Gan Eden. See, when he says, when he reads those psukim in Parshas Bereishis, that the Adam and Chava sinned, and Hashem said, "Vayigarish es Adam," that Hashem kicked out Adam and Eve from Gan Eden. You know what he thinks of that? When he looks at that parsha, he says, and that's not just an old story, that's about me as well, that I was completely kicked out of Gan Eden. And my problem that I'm stuck in, the quicksand that I'm stuck in, I am completely stuck in that quicksand. And so how am I supposed to get myself out? The Gemara says, as a principle, you can't get yourself out of prison. You can't get yourself out of prison. And so the Mitzvah therefore is sitting there helpless and waiting. I need someone else to come, a knight in shining armor, to save me. What am I supposed to do? And until that knight in shining armor comes, I have no choice but to avoid avoid paying attention to my problems because they're overwhelming. So what am I going to do? How do I get myself to not think about my problems and not to feel so bad about it? Well, I'll focus on other people's problems. And I'll make sure everyone else looks at their problem. The Mitzvah's problem is what? Is that there's no part of him that he believes is outside of that avdus, that slavery. Whatever he's enslaved to, he doesn't believe that there's any part of him that's not enslaved. The tikkun of the Mitzvah. This is why, again, as I said before, why was Lashon Hara the cause for the slavery of Egypt? Well, the answer is it's not an avera with a punishment. It's just a manifestation of what causes Lashon Hara from the beginning. The fact that the Jewish people were enslaved to Mitzrayim means that the problem of Galus Mitzrayim, the slavery of Egypt, means that they defined themselves. When they looked in the mirror, what did they see? They saw a person and a people that were completely enslaved. If you're completely enslaved, then it's only natural to eventually deteriorate into Lashon Hara. Because if you're completely enslaved, there's no way for you to get yourself out. And therefore you're in a state of misery. And so to avoid the pain and suffering of acknowledging that, you're just going to want to shift everyone's attention to someone else. Because there's nothing I can do about myself anyway. The tikkun of the Mitzvah, the beginning of the Mitzvah's tikkun, is what? Is to realize, is to be mechazik himself, that although I am in this problem, it's not true. There is a Mitzrayim that I'm stuck in, but there's a part of me that's not. There's a part of me that's still in Gan Eden. That's what Pesach is about. You see, what happened at Shabbos Hagadol, right? I mentioned Shabbos Hagadol is how we sort of get into Pesach. What happened by Shabbos Hagadol? So there's the Kotzker Rebbe used to say this. He said that people make a big deal about Tchias HaMesim, right? They're resurrecting the dead. Kilo, that's a big miracle. Said for God, that's not such a big deal. Even for big tzaddikim, Tchias HaMesim is not such a big deal. You want to know what Chiddush is? You want to know what's something, a real novel thing? Not bring the dead back to life, bring the living back to life. That's what happened with Shabbos Hagadol. You see, it's one thing for us to sit back and to be passive and to just accept the situation of Mitzrayim. And Hashem comes as the knight in shining armor with the blood and frogs and lice and all that stuff to help us out. It's very nice. It's not a Nes Gadol, it's not a great miracle. You know a great miracle? A great miracle are people that have for 210 years or 400 years have been living in a society that the Egyptian is the oppressor and they are the oppressed. That everything about their lives, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, have been completely enslaved and completely subdued and completely been passively affected by these Egyptians. And for the first time in their lives, they get up and do something on their own, for their own volition, knowing that it's going to upset the Egyptians, and they do it anyway. That's a Nes Gadol. That's a great miracle. That's the Jewish people finding strength to take responsibility and achrayas of their own lives. Instead of constantly being affected by the Egyptian and thinking, well, what is the Egyptian going to do? Like, how do I deal with him? For the first time, they're able to strengthen themselves and to say, you know what, this is something that we have to do, and we're not going to worry about whether the Egyptians are happy about it or not. That's a Nes Gadol. That's a big miracle. That's the beginning of fixing the problem of Galus Mitzrayim. Again, the cause of Galus Mitzrayim, the pain of that Galus is the feeling of a Jew that when they think that they're completely meshubed, completely affected by others without any power, without any part of them that's above enslavement. That's a terrible suffering. Jews that think like that think that they're completely bottled to Mitzrayim, that there's no part of them that's free at all. Those Jews cannot look at the Egyptian while preparing a sheep for a Korban Pesach. It's not going to happen. The beginning of Pesach was the Jewish people awakening themselves and realizing that although we're stuck in Mitzrayim right now, it's not true, but there's a part of us that's not. There's a part of us that's not. And the more a Jew can be mechazik oneself and remind oneself and define oneself based on that part of them that's not stuck in Mitzrayim, the more strength they'll have to climb out of that quicksand. That's the entire Inyan of Seder night is about it's about a re-education of the self. It's about re-educating ourselves. It's about becoming people and about realizing that there's a part of us. Let's put it this way. the Indian of Seder night, at the end of the Seder, so there's a couple songs, maybe I mentioned this last week, there's a couple songs that are a little bit funny, right? One of them is Echad Miyadeh, right? Who knows one? I know two. That's the end of the Seder, it's all leading up to that song, it's like a funny, what the pshat that song is? So we go around the table, right? So I see one plastic cover. When I look at this, I see one plastic cover, but you know what that means? There's a part of me that doesn't see a plastic cover. There's a part of me that's not enslaved to physical reality. And there's a part of me that sees one plastic cover for a sushi thing, and it automatically thinks one God. Automatically thinks one God. There's a part of me when I see two cups, I see two cups. But there's a part of me when it sees two cups, it automatically goes two luchas. And then one God. Three forks, three avos. Two luchas, one God. There's a part of you that thinks like that. And so the whole inyan of Seder night, the whole inyan of Pesach is building yourself up to the point of where you could begin to recognize that there is a part of you that's already free. That's what Pesach is about. There's a part of us which is enslaved, which is constricted to physical rules and regulations, and only sees the world as a physical place that's pretty much empty and chaotic. And if that's all a person is, then you're enslaved. Then you're completely enslaved. You're not going to get out of that. The inyan of Pesach is to be mechazik oneself that although that's partially true, that there's a part of me that's in Mitzrayim, and Pesach night we were still in Mitzrayim. So it's not about like getting out of Mitzrayim necessarily. But the inyan of Pesach night is to remind oneself and to strengthen one's emunah that there's a part of you that's not in Mitzrayim. That there's a part of you looks at life and doesn't see anything but Echad Elokeinu Shebashamayim U'Va'aretz. And there's a part of you that wants nothing more than just to connect to Echad Elokeinu Shebashamayim U'Va'aretz. That's what Pesach is. It's a re-education of the self. It's reminding yourself that although there's a part of you that's stuck in quicksand, there's a part of you that's outside of it. And the stronger and the more that you can connect to that part of you that's outside the quicksand, the more you'll get out of it. That's what it begins with Seder night. It begins with Shabbos Hagadol. It begins with Shabbos Hagadol. The Jewish people being able to have the confidence and strength to look at the Mitzrayim in the eyes and say, I don't care what you say. Because although you're in charge of me, in charge of my body, there's a part of me that you're not in charge of. There's a part of you that never went to Golus. It's that type of mentality is what gives the Jewish people strength to get out of Golus. That's the tikkun for the Mitzvah. The huva lakain, that he takes the initiative, he stands up on his own 2 feet and says, you know what, until now I've been enslaved to the circumstances of my life, and I haven't believed in Gan Eden at all. But if huva lakain means the beginning of his tahara process means that he strengthens himself and says that there's a part of me that's free. And there's a part of me that just wants to be holier and better. And because of that, I'll have the strength to better myself right now. Huva lakain. We should be zeicha that when we get to Pesach, the whole inyan of Pesach night is about being honest and real. People very often get caught up in vertlach and things, and it's like, and you're just not being honest and real. The avodah Pesach is to be normal and to be real and to be honest and to mechazik yourself that there's a part of you that's free, there's a part of you that's a tzaddik, and to begin to identify yourself based on that part. And the more you can identify yourself based on that part of you that's already free, that's how you'll get out of Mitzrayim. We should be zeicha, each and every one of us, to identify the Mitzrayim in our lives and have the strength and confidence to face them head on, to say, you know what, despite what you say, Afal Pikin, I'm going to do the right thing. We should be zeicha, each and every one of us, that just like our ancestors had Nisim, Mamish Nisim Gulim at this time, we should be zeicha to that also, V'yas Kol Tzaddik, and every minute all night.
Thank you, Hashem.